All right, so today we are going deep, really deep,
Deep.
into the world of agriculture.
Uh-huh.
But
Yes.
with a twist.
A twist.
We're looking at it from a conservative perspective.
Okay.
So specifically how the U.S. Department of Agriculture,
USDA.
the USDA, exactly, should be run.
Oh, right.
And for this deep dive,
Yeah.
we're going to be looking at Project 2025.
Yes. Which is a big
A
document.
big one.
Yeah.
We are focusing on Section 3, Chapter 10,
That's right.
written by Daren Bakst.
Yes, Daren Bakst.
No,
He's got some thoughts
he does.
about the USDA.
He does, and he doesn't hold back.
He doesn't mince words.
No, he does not mince words.
Not at all.
Especially when it comes to the Biden administration and their
goal.
goal of transforming the
Yes,
food system.
transforming the food system.
Now, Bakst's main argument
Yeah, his central argument.
is that American agriculture is already
Incredible.
hellacious.
Powerful. Affordable.
All the things.
Yeah, and he's got,
He's got the
he's got the receipts.
He's got the receipts. He's got the numbers.
the numbers to back it up. Get this.
Between 1948 and 2019, farm output, like what we're getting out of farms,
Yeah.
tripled while the amount of land used to farm went down.
So less land, more food.
Way more food.
Okay, so besides the fact that farmers are basically miracle workers.
Yes. That's the key.
What does that tell us? That is the key takeaway here.
Yeah.
What Bakst is getting at is this level of productivity makes food relatively affordable
yeah.
for just the average American.
Yeah.
Now, imagine if government policies
Yeah.
unintentionally disrupt that
Yeah.
that delicate
We're
balance.
messing with the magic.
Right, and then suddenly your grocery bill is like, what
Yeah.
is going up?
Nobody wants that.
That's a problem.
No.
Right.
Yeah, that's a big problem.
Big problem.
Okay, so where is this potential disruption coming from?
So Bakst is looking at initiatives within the USDA
Okay.
that focus on things like climate change
Okay.
and equity.
Right, which are huge issues.
Absolutely critical issues.
But
So
like
Bakst is saying, but Bakst argues that they shouldn't overshadow the core mission
Of just providing abundant food.
Right, yeah, put food on the table.
That's got to be number one. That's the basis, of this whole thing.
Okay.
So I'm starting to see where he's coming from.
Yeah. Like, for example, he uses this example of a $300 million organic farming initiative.
Okay.
So promoting organic farming may have its merits.
Right.
But Bakst is questioning whether the government should be picking winners and losers
Right.
when it comes to farming practices.
Like favorites, picking favorites.
Yeah,
Right.
favorites, right. Could that money be better spent elsewhere? Maybe on research that benefits all types of farming?
Farmers.
That's the debate he's trying to
So,
spark. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a provocateur.
He is.
A little bit.
That's what he's doing.
Yeah.
It does make you think, like, where does that money go?
Where does it go?
And who benefits?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so
Now,
what else?
this is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Bakst points out that the USDA's reach has expanded
Way
beyond
just
the original farming
Yeah.
function. So
like, what else are we doing?
they're now managing a huge chunk of the welfare system.
Really?
Yes.
I didn't realize that.
Including things like the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program,
So that's SNAP.
SNAP, or what we used to call food stamps.
Right. SNAP, most people have at least heard of that.
Exactly. But
Yeah.
here's the thing. SNAP alone cost
Like, how much are we talking?
a massive $119.5 billion in 2022.
Wow.
That's
a lot of money.
a serious chunk of change.
Yeah.
So Bakst's question is, should the USDA,
An agency focused on
agriculture,
even be responsible for these welfare programs?
I mean, it makes sense that it would be because it's
Yeah.
food,
Right.
but
It's also a lot.
the Department of Health and Human Services,
Right.
HHS, would be a better fit.
Okay. So
It's-
what would that even look like?
It would be a massive shift.
A massive shift.
Right.
What would be the pluses and minuses?
So on the one hand,
Okay.
you could potentially streamline things,
Yeah.
create more consistency across different assistance programs,
Right.
maybe even find some cost saving.
Okay.
But then on the other hand,
Yeah.
it's a massive undertaking
Yeah.
with a lot of potential for disruption.
Right.
And then there's also the question of whether HHS
Whether they even
have the expertise to manage a program as complex as SNAP,
right.
which is so interwoven with food production and distribution.
That's a really good point.
Like, yeah,
It's not-
multifaceted.
It is.
This whole thing.
Multifaceted.
Now, on top of all of this,
Oh, there's more.
Bakst brings up
Yeah.
another controversial topic.
Hit me with it.
The Commodity Credit Corporation,
CCC.
CCC, and he calls it
What does he call it?
a slush fund.
A slush fund.
So not a
Okay.
compliment.
Exactly.
What is it getting at?
Okay, so the CCC has this broad power to spend money
Okay.
without needing specific approval from Congress.
Sakes. Right.
So Bakst argues that both the Trump and Biden administrations have used this authority a bit too freely,
Bid too freely.
funding projects that Congress never explicitly signed off on.
So it's like a way to bypass Congress
That's exactly how Bakst sees it.
and fund whatever they want.
Pet projects, yeah.
Pet projects.
Right.
Wow. So he raises some really important questions about the separation of power.
Checks and balances.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Is this level of spending authority really in line with checks and balances?
Yeah.
You know? And should there be more transparency
Transparency, yes.
around how these funds are being used?
Absolutely.
It's about
accountability.
accountability. Yeah,
Okay.
big time.
Let's shift gears a bit and talk about something that affects probably everybody listening.
Okay.
Farm subsidies.
Yes.
I know Bakst has
He does.
some thoughts on this.
He has some strong feelings about this.
Yes.
He argues that farm subsidies need a serious overhaul.
Okay.
He believes they distort the market.
Okay.
They make farmers overly dependent on government support,
Okay.
and they don't actually address the root causes of agricultural challenges.
But wait a minute. Aren't subsidies meant to help farmers stay afloat?
Yes, that's...
Especially during tough times.
Right. The idea is to provide a safety net.
A safety net.
Right.
But Bakst is saying,
Bakst is critical of certain programs,
like which ones?
like the Agricultural Risk Coverage, or ARC,
ARC.
which he says protects farmers from even small dips in revenue.
Really?
Yeah.
So they don't even have to have that much of a loss.
It's like a shallow loss, very shallow
Interesting.
protection.
So he's saying this can actually disincentivize good risk management
Exactly.
on the part of the farmer.
Yeah, if you're always going to get bailed out,
Right, if you're covered no matter what.
why bother? Right.
Right.
Why even try to
Exactly.
manage your risk well?
Okay, so are there specific types of subsidies that he's targeting?
He specifically calls out
What's he going at?
the federal sugar program.
Sugar.
Now, this one is controversial.
I bet.
It essentially limits the supply of sugar
To do what?
to drive up prices.
Wait, so the government is intentionally keeping sugar prices high?
That's right.
Oh, okay.
And Bakst argues it unfairly benefits sugar producers
course.
at the expense of consumers.
Right, because we're the ones buying the sugar.
Exactly, who end up paying more for everything.
Yeah,
From candy to bread.
It's in everything.
It's everywhere.
Wow.
So he sees it as an example of how government intervention can distort the market
Yeah.
and hurt the average person's wallet.
The average person like me and you.
Exactly.
Okay, all right, so we talked about farm subsidies.
Yes.
But what about food assistance programs?
Right.
Things like SNAP
Uh-huh.
and school meals.
Knox definitely has thoughts on those too.
Okay, lay it on me.
He believes in a strong safety net, but he's also a proponent of personal responsibility
Okay.
and self-sufficiency.
So when it comes to SNAP, he's arguing for stricter work requirements.
Exactly.
Now, didn't the Trump administration try to implement stricter work requirements?
They did.
And then the Biden administration rolled them back?
Yes.
So it's like a
back and forth.
That really reflects a deeper philosophical divide on the role of government assistance, right? Like, should we be providing support no matter what?
Yeah.
Or should the focus be on encouraging people to become self-sufficient?
Right. It's a
Tough question.
It's a complex issue.
Yeah.
No easy answers.
It seems like finding that balance is the key.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Bakst also raises concerns about something called broad-based categorical eligibility.
BBC.
BBCE. Now,
Yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong, but this allows states to expand SNAP eligibility
Yes.
beyond the usual income limits.
That's right.
So even people who aren't technically low income could qualify for SNAP.
In some cases, yes.
Wow, so Bakst is arguing this undermines the whole point of the program,
He is. He's concerned.
which is to help
That BBCE opens the door for people who don't actually need assistance
to receive benefits.
to receive benefits, yeah.
It's all about making sure the resources are going to the people who actually need them,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah, and this focus on targeted assistance also extends to Bakst's views on school meals.
Okay, tell me about that.
He's critical of the Community Eligibility Provision,
Yep.
CEP, which allows schools in low-income areas to offer free meals to all students,
Regardless of their family's income.
regardless of their family's income.
So a kid from a wealthy family could get a free lunch even if they could afford to pay.
That's the concern.
Wow.
And he points to research showing that in states that have adopted CEP, the number of students from middle and upper income families receiving free meals has doubled or even tripled.
Whoa, that's a big jump.
It is.
So he's saying this dilutes the program's effectiveness.
Yes.
And could lead to higher costs overall.
Exactly.
So it seems like his main critique across the board is these programs are becoming too broad
Yeah.
and not focusing enough on the people who truly need help.
You got it.
He wants to see a return to what he sees as the original intent of these programs.
Right. Providing a safety net for the most vulnerable.
Yeah.
While encouraging self-sufficiency whenever possible. Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to another topic that's near and dear to my heart. Conservation.
Okay.
I'm curious what Bakst has to say about this.
So he makes a somewhat surprising argument about conservation programs.
Okay, what is it?
He acknowledges that farmers generally care about the land,
Right.
but he's critical of the Conservation Reserve Program.
The CRP.
CRP.
This is the one that pays farmers to take environmentally sensitive land out of production.
That's the one.
So the government is paying farmers not to farm.
Yes.
Isn't that kind of counterproductive? Especially when we're talking about food supply.
That's exactly Buck's point.
Okay.
He believes productive land should be used for food production.
Right.
Not idle.
Not sitting there doing nothing.
Exactly.
Okay.
He argues that CRP disincentivizes farmers from using their land to its full potential.
Okay.
And could ultimately lead to higher food prices.
So less food and it costs more.
Potentially, yeah.
I'm starting to see a theme here.
What's that?
Less government intervention.
Uh-huh.
More reliance on the market.
Yes.
And a strong emphasis on individual responsibility.
You're picking up on the pattern.
That stalks the whole thing.
Yeah.
Now, besides these big areas,
Right.
are there other issues he wants to see addressed within the USDA?
Oh, there are a bunch.
Okay, give me the rundown.
He's a big advocate for removing barriers to interstate trade of meat.
Okay, what do you mean?
So right now, if meat is inspected at the state level,
Okay.
it often can't be sold across state lines.
Really?
Yeah.
So if it's safe to eat in one state,
Right.
it should be safe to eat in another.
That's his argument.
Yeah.
He sees this as unnecessary regulation
Okay.
that hurts small producers and
Right.
limits consumer choice.
So more options.
More options, yeah.
For everybody.
And he also wants to shake things up when it comes to marketing orders and checkoff programs.
Oh, yeah, those ring a bell?
Yeah.
Remind me, what are those again?
Okay, so marketing orders are basically regulations that control the supply or quality of certain agricultural products.
Okay. And checkoff programs are industry-funded initiatives that promote certain commodities, like got milk, beef. It's what's for dinner. Those are the ones, yeah. Okay, but what's Bach's problem with them?
He sees them as government-sanctioned cartels.
Cartels.
Essentially that limit competition
Okay.
and drive up prices for consumers.
So again, it's hurting the average person.
The average person, yeah.
Okay.
He argues they benefit a select few within the industry
Okay.
while hindering innovation, keeping smaller producers from competing.
So it's back to breaking down barriers.
Yes.
And letting the free market do its thing.
That's a big part of his philosophy.
Yeah.
He also wants to see the USDA focus more on dismantling international trade barriers
Okay.
rather than promoting specific exports.
Interesting.
He believes that creating a level playing field
A level playing field?
for American farmers
Yeah.
on the global market is the best way to support them.
Okay. Anything else? Yes, there's more. There's
Why
who
he
else?
wants to remove obstacles to agricultural biotechnology.
Biotechnology, so we're talking
GMOs, genetically modified organisms.
Always a hot topic.
Always a hot topic.
Okay, what's his take?
He believes GMO have the potential to increase crop yields,
Okay.
reduce reliance on pesticides,
Okay.
and even enhance the nutritional value of food.
Okay.
He sees the current regulations surrounding GMOs as overly burdensome
Okay.
and based more on fear than science.
So he's advocating for a more science-based approach?
Exactly.
Okay.
And when it comes to forest management,
Okay, forest management.
he advocates for a more active approach
Okay.
to reduce the risk of wildfires.
Wildfires.
Yes.
Okay.
He believes controlled burns and selective logging can actually improve forest health
Interesting.
and make them more resilient.
Okay, that seems kind of counterintuitive at first,
It does.
but I can see how a proactive approach might be more effective in the long run.
Yeah, long-term thinking.
Okay, so is there anything else?
One last thing,
Okay, hit me.
and this one might be the most controversial of all.
Ooh, I like controversial.
He wants to eliminate
Eliminate
or at least drastically reform
Okay.
the dietary guidelines for America.
the dietary guidelines. So that's like
You know,
the food pyramid,
the food pyramid, my plate,
my plate, all that stuff.
all of that.
So no more of that.
Well, he argues that individuals,
Okay,
in consultation with their healthcare providers,
right.
are better equipped to make decisions about their own diets.
So less government telling us what to eat.
That's the idea.
Okay.
He's concerned that the dietary guidelines are often influenced by special interest groups
Interesting.
and don't always reflect the latest scientific evidence.
Okay.
So
It sounds like he really wants to shake things up at the USDA.
he does.
Wow, it's clear he has a very specific vision for what the USDA should and shouldn't be doing.
A very specific vision.
Okay, it's a lot to take in.
Yeah.
So thinking back on everything we've covered, what stands out to you as the most impactful or maybe surprising part of Bakst's vision for the UAEA?
You know, I think for me, it's the sheer breadth of his critique.
Yeah.
It's not just, like tweaking around the edges.
Right.
He's proposing a fundamental shift in the
Oh.
agency's role
Yeah.
and priorities.
It's a bold vision.
It is.
I mean, whether you agree with it or not,
Right.
it makes you think
yeah,
about what the USDA should be doing
in the 21st century.
in the 21st century. Yeah.
Exactly.
I think one of the most thought-provoking things that he puts forward
Uh-huh.
is this idea of potentially transferring welfare programs
Right.
like SNAP
Yeah.
to the Department of Health and Human Services.
HHS.
HHS.
Big move.
It's a big move. It makes you wonder,
Yeah.
are we compartmentalizing these issues too much?
Right.
Should we be thinking about food security
Uh-huh.
and social welfare
As
as
yeah,
interconnected,
interconnected.
you know, as a whole?
Yeah, it's a really fascinating question. On
Yeah.
the surface,
Yeah.
it might seem logical to have all food-related program under one roof.
Right, under the USDA.
Right.
Because they deal with food.
Right, but
But-
maybe there's a case to be made
Yeah.
for bringing,
Different perspective.
different perspective and expertise to the table.
Especially when it comes to these really complex needs
Yeah,
of low-income families.
that's right.
And then there's that whole debate about the Commodity Credit
The
Corporation,
CCC.
CCC,
Yeah.
and its broad spending authority.
Yeah,
This idea of a slush fund,
a flush fund.
it's scary.
Yeah, it really
Raises some red flags.
transparency about
Yeah.
transparency and accountability.
Right.
It's a reminder that, the power of the purse
Yeah,
is a fundamental principle of our democracy.
right,
Congress is supposed to have the final say on how taxpayer dollars are spent,
right.
and when that authority is eroded,
Yeah.
it can lead to a lack of oversight.
Absolutely. And
Potentially.
abuse, exactly. It struck me as we were talking about farm subsidies
Yeah,
that there's a peril here with this CCC slush fund idea.
I'm sure.
Bakst is arguing that certain subsidies, like the sugar program,
Right.
distort the market
Uh-huh.
and benefit a select few
At the expense of
at the expense of everyone else.
many, yeah.
Isn't that another form of concentrated power
That's a good point.
that could be used
To
to
benefit
special interests?
special interests, exactly.
So whether it's direct spending through the CCC
Yeah.
or this kind of indirect influence through programs like subsidies,
Yeah, I mean, the potential for undue influence
is there
and a lack of
a
transparency.
lack of accountability?
It's definitely there.
Absolutely.
So,
And Bakst's call for reform across the board.
uh-huh.
It's really a call for
More
more accountability.
accountability, yeah.
A closer alignment between what the government's doing
Yes.
and the interests of the people
Yeah, the people they're supposed to be serving.
who they're supposed to be serving.
That's right.
And speaking of accountability,
Yeah,
Art's critique of programs like SNAP and school meals
right.
raises some tough questions about how we balance support
With
with a self-sufficiency.
yes.
So on the one hand,
Uh-huh.
we want to make sure everyone has access to good food, nutritious food.
Right. We want to make sure people aren't going hungry.
Right.
We want to provide a safety net.
But on the other hand, but we don't want to create dependency
Right.
or disincentivize work.
Right, yeah.
It's tough.
It's a delicate balancing act.
It is, and the back and forth we've seen with SNAP work requirements
Uh-huh.
highlights just how politically charged this issue is.
Oh, yeah.
There's a fundamental difference in philosophy here,
Huge.
right? So
Absolutely.
people believe that government assistance is a right.
Right.
It should be available to everyone who needs it,
No matter what.
no matter what.
No strings attached.
No strings attached.
Right.
Others believe that assistance should be tied to things like work,
Uh-huh.
job training,
To encourage self-sufficiency.
to encourage self-sufficiency,
Yeah.
right? It all comes back to that.
It does.
And I think where you fall on that spectrum
Right.
probably influences how you view Bakst's proposals.
Exactly.
I mean, for some, his ideas might seem harsh,
Yeah.
maybe even heartless.
Right.
But for others,
Yeah.
they might be like, this is common sense.
Common sense.
You know,
Yeah, yeah.
This is how we make sure that these programs are actually helping the people that need it.
That's right.
And respecting taxpayer dollars and
Yeah.
encouraging, personal responsibility.
It all comes back to that.
It all comes back to that.
Mm.
And it's important to remember that Bakst is coming from a particular perspective.
Yeah.
He's a conservative.
He is.
And his views on the role of government,
Uh-huh.
individual liberty, free markets,
All of that.
all of that is reflected in what he's talking.
Exactly.
Which brings us to another key takeaway from this whole deep dive.
What's that?
It's so important to understand different perspectives.
Different perspectives.
Whether you agree with Bakst or not,
Right.
his arguments force us to confront some really fundamental questions
Yes, they do.
about the role of government in agriculture,
Uh-huh.
the balance between individual freedom
Yeah.
and collective responsibility,
A big question.
the big questions.
Right.
And how do we make sure that we have a safe, affordable, and sustainable food
Right.
supply?
Everyone, that's the key.
These are big questions,
They are.
but they're worth asking.
They are absolutely worth asking.
So to our listeners,
Yeah.
we leave you with this.
Okay.
The USDA touches every aspect of our lives.
It really does.
The food we eat,
Uh-huh.
the environment we live in.
Everything.
And there are so many different views
So many.
on how this agency should be run.
Absolutely.
What do you think?
Yeah. What do you think?
What role should the USDA play in the 21st century?
Big question.
How do we balance these competing priorities?
Right, food security, environmental sustainability.
Environmental sustainability, economic growth,
Right.
all of it.
It's a lot.
These are big questions,
They are.
but they're worth wrestling with.
Absolutely.
Because ultimately,
Yeah.
the future of American agriculture
Is in all of our hands.
is in all of our hands.
So keep learning.
Keep learning.
Keep questioning.
Keep engaging in these important conversations.
That's how we make sure
Yeah,
that the policies that shape our food system reflect our values.
right.
And serve the needs of all Americans.
Absolutely.
And as always,
Yeah.
thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
We'll see you next time.